All right, my name's Jordan Funk. I was a senior in 2010 here, and if I had to pick a candy bar, it'd be a fast break bar because there's like a bunch of different kind of candy, so when you bite into it, you're just gonna get all types. Not really sure which one. So I read your guys' questions. I'll kind of bounce between them, but if anything you guys think of and you just want to jump up in and ask, this is super informal, so please ask. I'm pretty open. I'm very open about my story and where I come from and my experience, because I was a K through 12 grad from Norris, and so I graduated 9 years ago. And so if there's anything that you guys think of while I'm talking, feel free to ask. I'll talk to you just about anything.
Jamie, you said Nate was coming later? Yeah. Okay. So he was the one that had like all the specific questions about like arrests and tasers.
I saw that. Was like,
so if you could save those for maybe the end, so that he could be here for them.
Gosh, yes, that sounds great.
It's like, okay, I can get my user form. Yeah. First thing, I'll go with number 4, like when did I know, and kind of talk about my journey. So I graduated from Norris in 2010. Typical small town. I grew up in Roca. I guess in our grade, I graduated with about 140, and you guys are quite a bit bigger than that now, right? Started dating a guy my sophomore year. He was a couple years ahead of me. Dated him all through high school. Dated through college. Moved in together. Got engaged. At my college experience was my opening of, hey, there's a different world out there. There's more than just what I was brought up with. I would say Norris was, at the time, it's obviously moving in the right direction of just being people having options of seeing that not everybody's the same. So specifically, I can remember I took a diversity class in college, and they all different types of conversations and topics, and one of them was like the LGBTQ topic. And so what they did is they brought in a panel of adults. They were teachers, they were doctors, they were lawyers, just anybody and everybody, and they all, I guess, they were all about that community. And so they just sat there and said, yep, this is me, this is my wife, this is my husband, these are my kids. And that was one of the first things that I looked at as like, oh, this is, in my head, I guess where I came from is, I knew a lot of stereotypes, but it wasn't super open at the time, and so you kind of just heard that maybe somebody was, or this person was maybe this way, but nobody ever really talked about it. We'll talk about just the direction from Norris. Back when I was in high school, I'm pretty sure it was still not okay for people to bring same-sex couples to prom and homecoming.
I don't think it was at that time.
It was not at that time. I remember a girl in my grade had actually tried to start something like this, and had put flyers up, and they all got ripped down, and she was pretty made fun of and humiliated through that process. I actually took a sociology class in high school here. It was an AP for SEC or whatever, and that gay marriage was one of the debates that we had, and I was actually one of them that raised my hand that said I was against gay marriage because I had no idea what it was even about. So when I went to college, I met a lot of new people, and in that I met some people who obviously said that they were gay or lesbian, transgender, and it came down to you literally met people from that culture that you weren't experienced with, and biggest thing that I learned is you put a face to them. It humanizes who they are, because at Norris, at the time when there was no culture about it, there was no education about it, I had no idea. I mean, to me, it was an alien. Gay culture was I had no idea about. I also will have to applaud to the Grey's Anatomy, because back in that time is when that was something that you didn't see on TV was gay couples. You did see a couple, Will and Grace, couple different shows that you'd see gay men or something together, but you did not very often see 2 women together and have a family and do all that stuff. And that was another reference or support, I guess, is used as was Grey's Anatomy, and being like, oh, this is normal, this is okay. So throughout college, I look back at it now, and people ask, when did I know? I didn't know until literally I was sitting my fiance down and said, I don't know if I like girls or not. I might, I don't know. But there's been some reoccurring things. I had a best friend in high school who I always showed up in an IAP class for some reason and wanted to hang out with her all the time. And there were multiple things throughout my life that I was starting to realize, hey, maybe this was a little bit more going on than they were just my friends. So I took it upon myself to say, hey, I don't know. I've been obviously in one relationship my whole life, but I can't get married, not knowing. And so my experience of coming out was I had told my fiance after we just bought a house together and that I needed to go home and sit and think about, just kind of figure out what's going on, because I had college class the next morning, so I was just going to go to class. And by the time I was in my second class, he had called his parents had called my parents and said that I was gay. So I never really got a chance to come out to anybody. It's people, I still think Norris is a small community, and it's a small town community, so a lot of people know your business.
See you guys.
Thanks for stopping by.
I'm getting a phone call from my brother.
And so my whole friends group, my whole community knew before I even knew. So it was a lot of pressure and a lot of, you walk in somewhere and you just think that everybody's talking about you. I was at Norris, I was a very outgoing person. I was in 3 sports, 4 years. I got scholarships. I was homecoming queen my senior year. I still have that tiara. My mom still has that tiara somewhere. But I was very well known in this community. So I think it was a big shock to people because obviously this culture, this area had kind of one perception of this community, and I didn't kind of fit into that profile. So it was, first year was interesting, I would say. You're always going to meet people who have their own opinions about it, and they're going to tell you about it even though you don't ask. But I think throughout the 10 years that, I guess, how just the nationwide, how the people's perceptions have changed on the community. That is one thing I will say. I'm not a huge fan of social media, but social media is a huge thing with people being more aware of what's going on. It was something super nice, because here I was literally the only one. I always called myself for a while the token lesbian of my grade, because everybody knew who I was and I didn't really know anybody in the community. So I wouldn't say I had any sort of support group besides a couple of the people through I had met in college that I kind of stuck with. It took my parents a little while to come around, dad longer than my mom. Siblings were always super good with it. My friends, everybody will tell you something to your face, but friends kind of die out and stuff anyways. I never really had I didn't have anybody spray paint my car or do anything like that extreme. I mean, I have heard other people's stories of parents kicking them out. It's still something to this day that people experiences. I've had multiple guys that I've met who even my age still don't feel comfortable coming out to their parents because religious reasons, what their parents might think, and all that stuff. So I will say you have to give your family, I guess, a little bit of room to be shocked, because obviously I dated a guy for 6.5 years, and then everybody seemed like it was just a complete 180. But as you sit there and get to talk to people and you said, oh, red flags here, maybe, I think if Norris was probably more how it is in this culture today, I probably would have known a lot sooner. But that is kind of that's the short story of kind of what happened. I identify myself as gay or lesbian. I know there's bisexual and asexual and all those different terms. That's how I identify myself. Everybody's different. Everybody's coming out story is different. So my story is just one of the thousands that could go one way or the other. While I was experiencing that, I have an opinion of there's obviously your sexual orientation, and then there's your identity, how you view yourself. I was always a big tomboy. You never saw me in a dress or anything like that. So that was also a process coming from a girl who dated men, and those, feminine women, how they're supposed to dress. It was also going through that process with me and being okay with, hey, this is how I want to identify, this is how I like to look, this is where I like to be. So getting used to going into Buckle and being like, no, these are not for my boyfriend, can I have a dressing room, please? It's just things you get over like that. And in this day, I'll be honest, I meet more people. 90% of people are accepting of who I am. I've rarely feel between people that they're judging me. You're always gonna have people that may not agree with you, and it's gonna be within people's rights to not necessarily agree with what you're doing with your lifestyle. I don't agree with, obviously I'm a cop, I don't agree with people smoking crack, but so you're gonna meet people who don't agree with your lifestyle, and it's better, to have an open dialogue and try to be, if they want to talk about it, a lot of people are just curious and they don't know how to ask. So they'll ask really random or odd questions to try to learn more about it. And so I've always been super open about even really weird questions and the tough questions, because in this generation, or just in our culture, this community, obviously sexual orientation, so the sex talks and all that stuff, it's always a hush-hush or taboo thing to talk about. So when people have questions, it's everybody, people from 12 years old who ask me up to, I have 50-year-old ladies who ask me questions because they're just curious. So that was kind of my story. I graduated college with a criminal justice degree, and I minored in art and education, so art is a huge hobby of mine. Ask Mr. Reed about me, and Mr. Carlson. I spent my entire senior year in that class. So then I started working, I was a correctional officer at the jail, started that, and I also joined the National Guard. So I was gone for 6 months for training, came back, started doing that. I've switched my roles a little bit, but right now to sum it up, I blow stuff up for a job in the military. So I work with C4 and dynamite and all that stuff, and learn how to blow up bridges and stuff. And then I also got an opportunity to be in an airborne unit, so I jump out of perfectly good airplanes for fun. So I do that, and then 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago is when I applied for the sheriff's department and got on. It's about 4 months training at the academy, and then it's about 4 months training after it with an FTO who rides with you, which is super fun. So it takes about 8 months to be all trained up, and then you're out on your own. So I've been out on my own for about 2 years now, and that's pretty much what I do. So
you like patrol this area?
Yeah, actually I choose to patrol this area because I know it well, so I know where all the good hiding spots are. So there's LPD, and a lot of people not sure about the police departments and stuff. You have state patrol, they're the guys with the weird hats, who can go anywhere they want in Nebraska, and they have jurisdiction, so they can write any ticket in Nebraska. For Lincoln Police Department, they take all their calls for service inside of Lincoln. And then for us, we take all of the calls for service outside of Lincoln and Lancaster, so it's in Lancaster County. Lincoln's in Lancaster County, so if I want to pull I've had debates about people when I pull them over in Lincoln. It is Lancaster County, I can still pull you over, but we don't take calls for service in Lincoln. So, most people probably have an idea how big Lancaster County is. If we're running how we're supposed to run, there will be a sergeant and a Hickman deputy, a Waverly one, and then there should be 5 of us roaming around. But at times there's just 3 of us. So it's a long ways to drive from Branch Oak to Firth sometimes, especially when it's blizzarding. But I work Wednesday through Saturdays, 3 p.m. to 1 a.m. They're 10-hour shifts. I love it. I love my job. It's a lot. I would say when everybody sees like Live PD and Cops and all those shows, you don't really get to see the behind of what you all have to do after all that happens. It's a lot of paperwork. I'm sure teachers know. You don't just teach kids, you have all this paperwork that you have to do. I go from running traffic to helping old lady that the cat's up in the tree. I mean, some of the calls that we get sometimes, it's crazy of just everything you have to know. It's a jack of all trades is what I call it, which I like it because I'm somebody who kind of gets bored easily. I like fast-paced stuff, and so if I'm doing the same thing over and over and over again, I get bored. So that's why I like my job. I probably plan on staying here for quite a while. That's where I'll try to keep the fun questions later for those.
Assuming he comes. He said
He was gonna try to, yeah.
Yeah, I'm in no hurry, and
You guys
It's
have.
like literally all of those questions are from.
yeah, I started, I'm like, oh, somebody's curious.
Yeah.
Let's see, like I said, resources, there's not for my sheriff department, a lot of the women actually in my field do identify with the LGBTQ community. It's pretty common. I don't know if it's just because it's being in a male-dominated field. Sometimes that's kind of what we're drawn to, or what some of the groups are drawn to. So I wouldn't say there's really a resource, but it's always been super helpful. They've always been really open. I've never felt any sort of discrimination when being there. Obviously, your first interviews with people, it's always going to be in the back of your head. What do they, some of the people who are older generation who've been there for a while think a little bit differently. But it's just one of those things, no different than being a woman in a male-dominated field. Same thing with the military. I'm the only female. And I mean, I think there's 140 guys and there's like 4 girls in our unit. So my whole shift, I'm the only girl. So it's just something I've always gotten used to though, but I was a tomboy, I always played with the boys. That's just how I always was. So none of that ever bothers me, but military was different because I went in 2013. Oh gosh, no, 2014 is when I joined, I think right around there. And 2010 is when Obama got rid of the Don't Ask, Don't Tell. So when I graduated high school, it was still illegal to talk about being gay in the military. You would be kicked out if you talked about being gay. So Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, boondocks, out in the middle of nowhere. Going there, I did not tell anybody right away that I was gay. I had a girlfriend at the time. I didn't talk about it because I had no idea what I was getting myself into or what that would do to me. If people knew, through time, being there for 6 months or so, people talk. Nobody cared. You had your drill sergeants. I mean, you'd get letters in the mail and stuff, and people would know, and you were able to talk about it, and I was getting myself worked up over nothing. Obviously, again, you're still gonna have people who have a certain perception or view on things, but things have changed now where they can't discriminate. They just have to treat you as long as you're getting treated like everybody else. I don't really care what their opinions are, but so the military, in my unit, there's 4 women, 2 of us are identified as gay. We have 2 or 3 gay guys that are open. We talk about it. We bring our dates to the military ball, and nothing's looked at anything different. First time doing it, you're a little nervous because you're like, here's me and my girlfriend. But like I said, over the years, I've really noticed that nobody really cares. The more people you talk to, nobody really cares. As long as you're treating them good and they're treating you with respect, I've always had pretty positive experiences. See, I got military, dogs. Sorry, I love all animals, but dogs. I help with a pit bull rescue here in Lincoln. Actually, yeah, he's out in Hickman, some of it, but we would go down to Wichita. I've probably fostered 8 or 9 death row pit bulls. I have 2 now. And we'd go down to Wichita and save those death row dogs that, they'd come in there and only have a day or 2 to find an adoption, and they'd euthanize them because the pit bull population is so bad down there with dog fighting. So I'm a pit bull fan, but I love all dogs and all animals, but I had 2 lap dogs, 80-pound lap dogs. So hobbies, art. I mentioned art. Still do it. I draw all my tattoos. Something else my parents had to get used to is tattoos, and so I wakeboard, I snowboard. I'm an adrenaline junkie, I guess, so I have a motorcycle. Even though I'm a cop, I have a motorcycle. Drive the speed limit, I try. Being outside, I do a lot of hiking. One thing I always like to do is do a solo hike trip once a year, so I go out places. I've been out to Washington, Colorado, and trying to get to Utah this year to just go out and hike. And does anybody follow that Patagonia guy, Patty? Yeah, he's good. I like him. If you haven't and you're like hiking, and he's a huge guy in the community. He actually is from here, from Lincoln. He's a professional photographer now, and he dresses up in drag and goes out and hikes and does all this really cool stuff. REI has followed him before and post stuff that he's posted. It's pretty cool to follow. So that was one thing, like social media and stuff. You can just go out and see that there's people. For me, I always felt that nobody really looked like me when I started dressing the way I did, or I didn't feel included, that I could like find people like me. And stuff like social media and stuff is huge for just being able to connect and see that there's so many other people like you. So that was the positive that I got from that. Did I always want to be in law enforcement? No. I was actually 1 year away from being a high school art teacher because I wanted to be like Mr. Reed.
Who doesn't want to be?
I know, right? So I was a year into my school, almost started my practicum, and I had an LPD officer who had brought a K-9, and he started talking about his job, and I said, all of a sudden, I go, yep, that's what I want to do, and I switched and graduated and started riding along with all the K-9s, and that's still a goal for me, is getting in the K-9 unit and starting to do some volunteering for that. I got to go be in a bite suit this week, so that'll be fun. But does anybody have any questions at the moment? Anybody can think of?
Do you feel like you do, like, just like in law enforcement, do you interact with the LGBT community, like, you know, any issues that like you find people have? I've gone on a couple mental health calls where somebody who is in that community is struggling, and depression, suicidal thoughts and stuff like that, and it is who has come, they're thinking that way because of that community, and they feel lost, and they don't have anybody to connect to. And so I need to do better about having actual resources to reach out to them. We obviously have our mental health groups that we reach out to, but I need to go and look at specifically that community that I could hook somebody up with. But usually with those cases, I'm pretty honest about my experiences with that, and it kind of brings it down to a human level where you can talk to them and get them the help that they need. How's it going?
Here's our, this is the guy.
This is Nate.
This is who we were waiting for to answer all the crazy
We need to wait
questions.
for the crazy questions.
The taser.
Did you remember that?
You can introduce yourself and say what kind of team you are.
If you were
That's
doing
the
team
fun.
bar, what would you do?
This is Thomas's addition.
Oh.
I'm Nathan. If I was a candidate, I'd be.
They kind of are a big one. No, she is, but I don't know how much of her. When would have?
Pica Fresa, it's a Mexican candy.
Okay.
It's
Those are good.
Delicioso. What is it? What is it?
it's it looks like a gumball kind of, but it's like jelly and it's strawberry flavored.
Oh, yeah, candy or what? Well, there's these like Mexican things, and it's like kind of a crepe with caramel.
Also, this is, do you want to introduce yourself? Because
I know Nathan.
Oh, you
He's
do
my
know?
neighbor.
Oh, okay.
He gave her a ride to school today.
Yeah.
She was late.
And my sister.
She was late. That's what he said.
Didn't
I graduated with D's mom from high school, so.
Crazy.
The address, I don't.
You don't know if
Neither one of us remember. Yeah.
Shocking.
You should all
Okay.
go to the Parthenon training.
Well, that's really, I think that's cool though that you talked about, because that was like a big reason that we wanted to join, is just so that everybody could create a group like this, is so that there was like resources available and that people, you know, weren't trying to do this on their own.
Yeah, it's huge. It makes a big difference. Even now, talking, when I'm venting about my girlfriend or anything like that, it is nice to talk to somebody who has been there or understands it, because it does bring in a little bit of differences from other people, and so, especially right away, just that first group of friends that I had met, who had been in the community for a long time, was super, super helpful, because at the time I didn't have anybody. I didn't know how to talk to my parents. I didn't know how to talk, my sister was always somebody who came around. I could always talk to her, but like my other siblings, there was no way I'd talk to them about what I was going through. So
You
that
said
was,
sorry,
No.
you said it wasn't even like in your mind, like to be gay, like
Yeah.
that wasn't an option for you.
no, it wasn't even an option.
Right.
I remember is sophomore in college. So I was a big drawer. Obviously, I doodled and wrote and journaled and all that stuff. And I didn't even remember that I did. I found this was years later. I was doodling in my notebook, and I'd actually wrote about it. I never even said the word gay. Couldn't even write to myself that I would be gay. But I remember writing stuff about it that maybe like in a different life I could be, or I don't really understand how I'm feeling, but why I have a guy who treats me really nice, and so why would I throw something like that away of something that you don't even know what is going through your head?
Right.
I don't know if I was sheltered or talked to my parents about this before, and I talked to my mom, and it's one of those things of trying to, a generation who does it, they just don't understand. A lot of them don't. They just, same way that I was raised, is you just didn't see anybody, or you kind of knew those stereotypes, and that's all that you really knew. And I remember having a conversation with my mom as like, obviously I'm a tomboy, but not everybody who identifies as gay is a tomboy. There's people who dress just normal people, and so it has nothing to do with how you're dressing. And because I remember she said, I was a tomboy in high school, and I like boys, and I'm like, I know, Mom, but you just have, it's interesting when you start talking to people of, they just don't know. They just didn't understand, and when you kind of dumb it down and say, hey, when you were with your friend, did your heart beat fast and you start sweating? Did you start, always thinking about that person? Oh no. Okay, Mom's not gay. So it's funny, like joking about it, but it was like literally being able to bring these people who didn't understand, just talk to them like a human and say, these are human feelings that I'm feeling, and it's the same thing as everybody else. And it really, my biggest thing is my dad, like I said, small community, they're still around, everybody knows, a lot of people know who my family is, and so just being able to say, hey, that's Jordan's still Jordan, she didn't change, nothing's changed, it's just, she's bringing around a girl now, and that's really all the difference was. And it put a lot of people, because I'm still in this community, so people knew me before and they know me now, and it really makes no difference, is everybody treats me the same. So I've very few, usually it's people that I don't know very well. I'm trying to think of like negative perceptions. I've had some pretty rough ones. Guys, people who think that we shouldn't get married and we shouldn't be able to have kids and it's detrimental to kids and all this crazy stuff. And the thing is, with certain people, unless you can have an open conversation about it, if they're set on their ways, there's not really much you can do about it. You can kind of try to give your opinion and stuff, but as you get older and realize, okay, this isn't a very positive direction that we're going, there's really not much you can do, and they're just going to have to figure it out on their own, and some people don't change. I kind of see this as the same way as, obviously interracial marriage was such a thing back in the day, is that, I still think people deal with that today, is people judge and stuff on that, and grandma and grandpas and stuff, they kind of have their own, those ways and stuff. My grandma knows. I told her, and she kind of and walked away, and that was it. So I'm not going to be able to get my grandma to completely understand it and completely be okay with it. But I always tell myself, and I said that from the beginning, I'm not going to do anything different because I'm around somebody who feels uncomfortable. I'm going to bring my girlfriend around. I will hold her hand. I will act like a couple in public. I don't care what anybody else thinks. So if they have a problem with it and they feel the need to come say something to me, that's completely fine. I will have something to say back. So, but I guess the surprise of the support. I guess because I have heard a lot of people. I know people who've moved states. got kicked out of their house. And it was a little rough right away when this first happened, but I still hang out with the people. I still see people I went to high school with. People that knew me before don't treat me any different. Obviously, I stay in the same community I grew up in, and I was probably surprised actually of how much support it was compared to how much negativity I thought I was going to get. Cop stuff. You wanted to talk about cop stuff. Craziest arrest. Like I said, I've only been on 2 years. I think I do a pretty good job of talking to people. I don't go out there most of the time of want to get into something where I have to use physical force. Craziest arrest is we had a mental health lady on the interstate. She had gotten out of her car. It was blizzarding out. She was running around with a knife, swinging around and trying to get her to come and talk to us, and she wasn't, and she kept coming towards us. We tried to tase her. Well, it was blizzarding. She had a coat on, so it wasn't anything. So I work on the same shift as my dog guy, so we got to send the dog on her. She goes down pretty quick, and she gets handcuffed, and one of those things is somebody who was drug abuse and mental health, which is a big thing that I see all the time, and that swirling. She just needed a lot of help. So I think she ended up just going to Bryan West for getting checked in for the hospital. I think that's where she ended up going. I haven't ever used pepper spray. I hope I never have to use it, because usually if I have to use it, I'm going to end up getting it too, and it's not fun.
You've been pepper sprayed though?
Yeah, in the military. I've been tased. Tasing is not fun either. I would actually rather be tased than OC.
Did you get pepper spray?
Yeah.
Oh, mine's high grade pepper spray. Mine's not the ones that you buy at the gas station. Mine is like OC. So it'll make your eyes burn for about 2 days.
Thanks.
Yeah, hey, good seeing you. The tasers that we use, it's obviously the ones you see on TV. It's the kind of look like little guns, and they have the prongs that shoot out. It's about an 8-second ride that you do. It's not fun. But we had a guy 2 days ago who ran, and we ended up having, through the whole course of everything, he got tased 5 different times, and he said he only felt it about twice. And we used the dog on him, and that was actually a pretty good one too.
Highlight reels.
Yeah, I think there was something on the news about that one.
I witnessed an arrest when a guy was tased 3 times, and even then they had to put the dog on him at Wagon Train. So that was
When was this?
Wagon Train Lake.
Yeah.
This guy was really drunk, angry at his cousin, going around screaming, "Marshall!" And it
Yeah.
was funny until someone screamed, "You got a knife."
Yeah.
It's not funny.
It was not.
Bye.
See you later, Maddie.
Bye, Maddie.
Bye.
I've never tased anybody yet. It'll happen, I'm sure. I try my hardest, I really do. I don't like to use force on people when I don't need to. I'm not out there to push people down just the heck of it.
That is
Super nice to
refreshing.
hear.
Yeah.
And
That's the
night-
majority of police officers, right?
Majority are, but a lot of there's definitely a gap between people and the police force, and obviously we're coming with a new generation of transparency, and you hear about the corruptions and all that stuff, and so there is a need to explain. If you sit down and you explain to somebody of like, this is kind of what's going on, the people understand a lot better. It's one of those things where the reason why we don't say things or we don't tell you things is because it's a safety reason. I'm not going to tell somebody he has a warrant when he's sitting in his car and his car's running, because it's easy for him to say nope and get in the car and drive. So if I ask you to step out of the car, doesn't mean you have a warrant, but there's a reason why we do it, and so a lot of people don't understand that. And again, the social media and stuff with corruption and use of force and all that stuff, it's just most of it's a huge miscommunication between what needs to be done and why it's obviously there's cops who can't talk to people. I mean, there are, and like I said, even people that they aren't great people, I can usually get them to do what I want to do by talking to them and thinking that they may have a choice, even though they don't, but they think they do. Yeah, I'm trying to think of better work stories. There's always good work stories. We as a sheriff's department compared to LPD, we work as the coroners under the county attorney, so we do all the death investigations in Lancaster County. I did not know that actually when I applied. So a lot of dead bodies. So if you're into that, I know you came in at a weird conversation. If you're into that, I mean, I hang out with all the funeral home guys. They're awesome. I mean,
Is that,
What? Yeah.
No.
you know, the funeral home guys?
Yeah. Of course.
Okay, we're gonna.
Most,
So
but it's
there.
rare for the
I
funeral
used to
guys to get
work
like a
there.
fist bump in a
Yeah.
crowd of people. Yeah.
How you doing, Roger?
where does he?
Roger,
I
the
know
one with
Roger.
one leg.
Yes.
Oh my god, he's amazing.
Yes. Yeah,
See?
Roger.
She
So
did say-
Of course I know.
I love dog calls. I'll take all the dogs running around on the streets. I'll go get them. I have a buddy who's kind of scared of dogs, and so he always calls me when he doesn't want to deal with dogs. But a lot of stuff that I go to is just family disturbances, domestics, juvenile disturbances, runaways. Mental health is definitely a thing that people need to realize more, that we need more resources for it. We have a couple good programs here out in Lancaster that we can utilize, but it's trying to detach from, we're supposed to be called in an emergency situation, and a lot of these people, they get to they don't know what else to do. They don't know how to control the situation, so we get called and we can kind of put a Band-Aid on it for the night, separate everybody, but it really doesn't solve the problem. And so we're trying to come up with better resources for actual groups and people to be able to come in and talk to them. It's been a couple times in this, I've met people within this community who is struggling with depression and suicide, and they feel alone and they got kicked out and all that stuff. So to be able to get resources for them where we can only do so much in certain situations, but to try to get them in a long-term resource. So,
Do you have any, I know your experiences maybe because you weren't like out and gay in high school, but do you have any advice like to your former self kind of that like these guys could take away?
that's a good question. Man, back then, I don't know if I would have came out. I really don't think I would have.
Were there people out at Norris?
We had, my grade alone, there was one.
Yeah.
There was maybe, when I was a freshman, there was one guy that people kind of thought maybe was, but I don't even know if that was ever confirmed. Like, nobody was, I didn't know anybody.
Like openly gay.
Yeah,
You know,
nobody was
there's-
openly gay.
There's a few people that came through Norris who they knew they were,
But they were
and
not.
they might confide in maybe one person or two, but they were not open and knew that this was not the place for them to start that path. So
Yeah.
they waited until they graduated and had a
That's why I always tell these guys, they're brave. These kids are brave.
Yeah.
Because the community, I mean, even though there has been changes,
yeah.
it's still not like,
Yeah, I hope someday I'm not introduced as, hey, this is my lesbian friend, or hey, this is my, it happens, but someday I'll be like, oh, this is just my wedding. I don't have to say my gay wedding. And
Yeah.
it'll get there, and it's, like I said, it's only been 9 years since I've graduated, and it's huge. Like, having this here is huge, because that was never a thing. It was, like I said, I didn't even think about being gay. I didn't even think it was an option.
Any questions for Gary? This was really awesome.
yeah, it was
Yeah.
super
Thank you
cool.
so much.
Yeah, I hope
for
I didn't
coming.
ramble too much, or
No, it was
I
awesome.
kind of went all over the
Perfect.
place. So,
It was really
Um,
perfect.
yeah, I'm off on Tuesdays, so I like.
And even if you don't have questions, if you just want, if you have something to share, like, you just
Oh,
share, like,
yeah,
a
we
normal
didn't-
meeting too,
Why are
you
you
know?
looking at me?
I'm just looking at,
Yeah,
there's not
yeah.
many people
Well,
here.
you
So,
like to converse.
you like to share things usually.
You do like to share. You usually bring something interesting.
What's like a good book or a movie that you
You do usually bring a good